this situation in Central Africa, in Gabon, the Airtel Uganda IPO, which debuted today, as well as Kenyan banks making big income from overseas subsidiaries. Welcome my guest, Ali Khan Satchu. Is a market professional, a founder and CEO of Rich Management based in Nairobi, and is live to us now on the show. Good evening, Ali. It's good to see you again. Thanks for connecting in.
Thank you for having me, Bosun.
I'm sure you're reading the tea leaves of Gabon's military coup. What do you see? What should the markets make of it, Ali?
So, we've been watching a practically Malcolm Gladwellian type scenario unfold in Western and Central Africa. Gabon is Central Africa. We've seen 10 coups since 2020. Gabon is the latest in that sequence. And clearly, what we're seeing, I think, is a rolling back at speed of the French influence in this part of the world. In Gabon in particular, the Bongo family have been in power for more than half a century. There's clearly was unhappiness bubbling under the surface. And what we've learned in Africa is the most powerful instrument to create change is the military. And we've seen that happen. As you mentioned in your earlier report, we saw a sharp slide in the Gabonese Eurobond, less of a slide in the nature swap Eurobond. We've seen a sharp slide in companies which have exposure to Gabon, Total, and also a couple of mining companies. But, people will focus on the oil situation, but that's just 250,000 barrels per day. But the bigger problem is going to be for the manganese markets, where Gabon supplies practically 20% of the global supply. So, look, it's a fluid situation, but, it really does feel as if we're at sort of a tipping point moment, a la Malcolm Gladwell, in many parts of sub-Saharan Africa.
Well, that's one very ugly news on one side. But let's move very quickly to Airtel Uganda, which is some good news, selling some 3 billion shares via an IPO ahead of a local listing in Uganda. How closely are you watching this development from Nairobi, my friend?
Well, I'm watching it very closely. Obviously, this will be the third big IPO for the Ugandan market. Stanbic Uganda some years ago was a biggie. And then last year, I think we had MTN Uganda. This is the third one that's going to be transformative for the Ugandan Stock Exchange going forward. I was a little bit disappointed that investors won't get exposure to the mobile money business. Airtel has spun that out into a separate business. But I think investors might be a little bit disappointed because, as we know from Kenya and the M-Pesa business, it's the mobile money business that is very, very juicy. But overall, I expect this to be fully taken up. I think the valuation is a fair one for investors. There was a dip in the last full year earnings, but an expected rebound in this full year earnings. So I think it's an attractive offer. There's been a dearth of IPOs across the continent, and I think this will spur activity in Uganda. And I think in valuation terms, it offers value for those who are going to get in at the ground level here.
So, Ali, to sum it up in Kenya where you are, what's the magic for Kenyan banks raking in multi-billion shillings in revenue from subsidiaries outside the shores of Nairobi? Tell me the trick.
So, they were very prescient in many cases. This is now the fruition of a strategy that unfolded more than 10 years ago. As Kenyan banks sought to balance the risks of their home market with exposure to the region. And obviously, some have done considerably better than others. I think the Equity Bank really, in its purchase of the Congolese banking business, that's the jewel in the crown, I think, of all the regional expansions by Kenyan banks. That has been a phenomenal purchase and a real driver for profit growth for equity. Other banks which are performing well this year, NCBA, as you mentioned, That's really a turnaround story in the regional banking subsidiaries. They were underperforming, but have now begun to pick up. They've recapitalized, for example, Tanzania, and they're seeing a significant boost there. So I'd really, if I was an investor, I'd look at equity, I'd look at NCBA, and I'd also mention Stanbic, where the CEO, who was previously at KCB, has been unleashed in Stanbic Kenya. And that really, although it's not regional, the exposure is not regional, it's significantly outperforming its peers.
Very interesting. Thank you. Taking us through the markets now east of the continent. Thank you so much, Satchu, founder and CEO at Rich Management in Nairobi, Kenya. Thanks for those insights and have a great evening. We appreciate it as always.